Hello, and welcome to this short video describing use of the PAXcamX camera series, including the PAXcam X3, PAXcam X5, and PAXcam X12 models. I'm using the PAXcam X12 today for this demonstration. You should have a PAXcam icon on your desktop. Click that to open the camera. When you do, you'll get a live preview image of what's under the microscope right now, what the camera is seeing. You can do your fine focusing, you can move the sample around, and others will see that happening in real time. Now, admittedly, this is not a good image, and I'll show you how to make adjustments to your camera so that you can get that looking good for other people to share. The three things you're going to need to pay attention to are exposure, contrast, and color. The controls for adjusting these are on the right-hand side of the live preview image, and they're in panes that can be expanded and contracted. Right now I just have a capture button exposed, but I want to expose my controls here for adjusting exposure, contrast, and then color as well. So there are additional controls for the camera available, but we have those collapsed just to keep the interface simple, so there's not a lot of buttons and sliders that you have to deal with. There is an exposure slider where you can make large adjustments to the right for brightness, to the left to make things darker. By the way, if you're in a situation where it's way too bright, way too dark, you can just hit the Find Exposure button also to get back into the ballpark as to where you need to be. And then you can use the up and down arrows at the end of the slider to make tweaks to that exposure adjustment. Contrast is available on this slider, contrast being the differentiation between brights and darks in your image. So if you're at high contrast settings, you see your brights are very bright, your darks are blocked up and black. If you go to low contrast, everything looks kind of muddy, everything just kind of goes to a gray tone. So you want to be at an intermediate level here. Typically between 1.0 and 1.5 is a good place to be for pathology specimens. And you can see now we've got good contrast and more pop to the image without things blocking up too badly. We still see, though, that the color is off. And in this case, what I would like to do is to make a color adjustment by using this eyedropper sampling, the middle control for your white balance options here. So if I click this, my cursor will change into an eyedropper. This allows me to select a small area of the image that shows the background, not in my sample itself, but the background illumination that should be white or should be a neutral gray. And so I make the click, it makes the correction, and now not only are my whites better, but it corrects for my blues and my pinks and my browns as well. Now that I have a good exposure value, decent contrast, decent color, I can go ahead and capture this image. But before we do that, let me show you a couple other things here. One is that you can set your exposure. So if you like this exposure value, the brightness level of the image, if it's set, then you can change objectives. See, things are bright, but then the camera will automatically adjust down to a level where it's proper exposure. Same when I switch back to the 40x, you see that adjustment being made very quickly to get me back where that needs to be. So this is an auto exposure control. The other way to operate this would be to just uncheck this. It allows you to make adjustments up and down. So if I were at this point to go to the 20x, things are super bright. I can just hit Find Exposure, kind of get in the ballpark, make my adjustments from there up and down as need be. The same way here, go up to 40. It's very dark. Hit Find Exposure. I'm right back to where I can make some quick adjustments here. So the option would be to set the exposure, have the camera make the automatic adjustments for you as you switch, or you can just manually hit Find Exposure to get there very quickly. I can also set this up for color, exposure, and contrast as a preset in my display settings controls here. So I'm going to expand this. By the way, I do have preview size available here as a control. So if I want to make this a smaller interface for the camera controls, I can do that. If I'm doing something else in the background here, I can also go to a medium or large preview, or fill the screen, which puts this interface at the height of my screen resolution. But for saving settings, again, in the display settings area of the user interface, I can click this Save Setting checkbox, and then I've got 20 presets available to put in here as a standard or default or some setting that I can get back to. This is very handy if you have different special stains that might require a little different color adjustment or contrast adjustment and so forth, where you've got things set up a little differently from one to another. So I might call this my standard Cyto setting. And now, if I come in and someone else has been using the microscope and the camera, and they've got things set very differently than I want to see them, instead of checking this box, I've got it unchecked. So instead of saving the setting, I'm going to recall it. I can come back here to where my Cyto standard that I just put in, and I pop right back to those settings that were stored. One other thing I would like to show you as a special control here, you might see that I do have some good rendition of the cells in my sample, but my nuclear detail is kind of being obscured because of the density of the stain in that area. If I were to increase the exposure to the point that I can start to see some differentiation here in the nuclei, then the rest of my sample goes too bright. So there is a special adjustment called a gamma adjustment that allows you to increase the level of the dark areas without oversaturating the light areas. And so if you come into a place where your darks are just blocked up, you're not seeing the detail that you'd like, but some of your other areas are thin and are going to get washed out if you expose it too much, pop down your extra controls that are available here in brightness and contrast. Each of these panels have additional controls that are typically not used but can be accessed. Here's my gamma adjustment. If I set this higher, by doing that, I need to make an adjustment to exposure and contrast, but you can see the difference that it makes here in this nuclear detail that's available here and in some of these darker areas, where I still see my background cells, but I've got more detail available. Another expansion area that's available is in the color pane. And here, a couple of things. One is color saturation. You see low saturation is really muted colors, almost to a black and white level. High saturation is like neon colors, very intense. Typically, this is set at from 0.8 to 1.0, somewhere in there, but it is adjustable if you need to desaturate some really intense stain, or if you need to add some color to some very lightly stained specimens. There are also color matrix settings. These are like a color temperature setting. You can see some of these have quite a difference. Incandescent adds a lot of blue. If you're using LED lights, I would typically just go to none. That tends to do a good job there. Again, all of these things can be saved. So if I come in here and go back to my save setting, I've got my gamma setting here for Cyto. Let's just say I switch now to my other, go back to standard Cyto versus the gamma setting. You can see the difference right away in this amount of blockiness in the dark areas and so forth. If there are any questions, please give a call. We're glad to help, and hope this was beneficial for you.